About 10 years ago, the then President Thabo Mbeki started this initiative, and the word African Renaissance came up. He did a speech in Parliament about I am an African, and that was fairly widely distributed. And he succeeded in getting about 4 countries. It was 4 countries. It was Nigeria, Senegal, Algeria, and South Africa. Sort of led this process for the establishment of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, also known as NEPAD. PIDA, to jump forward, basically was born out of this initiative that's already started 10 years ago. So it's the first continental program for infrastructure development in Africa, and it covers 4 sectors: transportation, energy, transboundary water resources, and ICT, information and communication technology. Who is responsible for this? It's the African Union, African Development Bank, and the NEPAD Planning and Coordination Agency. What we are talking about today has been approved at the highest level, or at a head of state level. So it is still early days, but it's important to take note of that. The other very important thing as we talk about this today, what you have to realize about PIDA is that it's a continental program, but it only deals with those projects that has a regional impact. So it might be a smallish project, but if it's along a corridor or a transmission line, or it's a harbor that serves a region, then it falls. It's a very important criteria that you have to keep reminding yourself today as we talk about this today. Basically, the PIDA study is finalized. There's still a few things to be done, and the implementation process has basically started, and it's called the PIDA Priority Action Plan 2012 to 2020. In short, PIDA is about interconnecting, integrating, and transforming a continent, the regional infrastructure that Africa needs to integrate and grow through 2040. So it's a long-term vision. And that is what I would call a loaded statement. And it is an excellent summary of what PIDA is. Africa is not growing because there's a lack of regional integration, and you'll hear a lot about it. Now, basically, STAP and MLTSF were the 2 first stabs at making a continental list of projects and saying Africa, to be able to grow, needs regional integration, and these are the projects. NEPAD STAP did not progress. A number of reviews during 2004, around 5 were done, and some of the reasons that they found included lack of clarity. In the beginning, there was a lot of misconceptions about NEPAD. When people started talking about it, there was this conception that it would be this one agency that would have a big pot of money, a long list of projects, and they will be responsible to implement this. But this, of course, did not take cognizance of the fact that there are a lot of existing regional and continental bodies who already have a certain responsibility for this. And one of the big initial problems of this thing was that it was stepping on some toes and established interests. What are the RECs? The RECs is the SADC, the Southern African Development Community, COMESA, ECOWAS. There are basically 7 of them in Africa, and it's a regional organization that mostly works on soft issues. A lot of them don't have any actual experience in receiving money and executing physical projects. A lot of what they do focus on the soft issues and on the regulatory environment. So in other words, making the regulations work across borders for transportation and things like that. I remember Abdoulaye Wade from Senegal, the president, about 6-7 years ago, launching a scathing attack on NEPAD and what has it done or anything like that. The point that he missed, though, it was his program. The question that should be asked, what are the African states doing about it? And the African private sector, and this is a question I will be asking you today as well, is what are you doing to position yourself? It's no use to cry over spilled milk in 20 years from now when nothing has happened. You have to almost assume that it will be difficult to implement this, and in order for your business to position itself to make money out of it, to put it bluntly, you have to think very carefully what your role and how you position yourself in terms of this initiative. So during this time of turmoil, the old consultants were fired, I think is a good word. And then out of all this turmoil, the PIDA appointment and how they would appoint the consultants and what they would do and that sort of thing slowly started bubbling out from this. And you will notice that the word NEPAD doesn't appear in the word PIDA. So there's a definite movement away from saying when it comes to projects and regional integration, let's have a name that says what it does. At least that's my interpretation of the whole business. Africa's infrastructure crisis is the basis of the PIDA initiative. The basic fact is that 34% of the population, or only 34% of Africa's population has access to roads. Electricity, 30% of the population has access to electricity, against 70 to 90% in the rest of the world. Shocking figure, water, 3.8% of the resources are used. It just shows you the Congo River Basin has between 20 and 30% of the world's fresh water in one of the river basins in Africa. ICT, 6% of the population has internet access against 40% of the rest. The three agencies is the African Union Commission, the African Development Bank, and the joint initiative basically wants Africa-owned, ambitious but realistic program of priority regional continental infrastructure projects in transport, energy, ICT, and transboundary water resources. 15 years ago, Africa realized intra-Africa trade is less than 10%. The next lowest intracontinental trade is South America, and you're talking about 40–50%. Africa will not grow its economy if it doesn't start trading with itself. And it will not start trading with itself if some of the firms around this table don't get involved in executing some of the projects. We will start having a realistic basis of addressing some of the most debilitating problems that Africa has. Of all the continents, it has the highest number of countries in it. Africa will not, the Union of African States, or the United States of Africa, as our late brother leader from Libya used to call it, is something that is in the interest, if you think about it logically. To have 50 countries, large percentage of them landlocked in one continent, and not have some kind of a union where every little country has its own electricity utility, language, borders, that sort of thing. It's a mess. The only way you can solve this problem, regional integration, if Africa just spends a small percentage of its own money on funding some of these regional projects. 0.5, there are higher estimates that I've seen later on. That's a very generous one. But there's a lot of talk for the last 10 years on EPAD, but what these guys are now saying is we can grow the African economy if we just spend 0.51 or 2% of Africa's GDPs on fixing some of these key regional integration projects. The financial community and the built environment broadly community, contractors, consultants, all of us, we need to figure out ways where we don't fall into the trap where we offer financing with or a solution, but like Mike said, they're not interested in our money for various reasons. It could be cost, it could be anything. But we're in the region and we are Africans and we need to find a way of making this work.
The official definition that we're using is the one that is being used in the MOU that's going to be signed by the tripartite, which is the EAC, SADC, COMESA, on the North-South corridor, and that seems to be the most official version. In terms of ports, there's only one official port in the corridor, and that's the port of Durban, and it's inland waterways. Road routes, they all lead through from the Durban port, the one through, both of them through Johannesburg, then the one goes up through Botswana, through Martin's Drift, Francistown, Kazungula, through to Lusaka, and then through to Lubumbashi, Kolwezi. And the other route is through Botswana, through Harare, Beitbridge, Chirundu, Lusaka, and then straight through again into Katanga province in the DR Congo. The other one, yeah, Beitbridge, Bulawayo, Victoria Falls, so it splits in Zambia and goes again through to Kolwezi, Lubumbashi. And the other one is through to Blantyre and Lilongwe in Malawi. In terms of railway routes, again, two routes coming from Durban Port, the one up through Beitbridge, Victoria Falls, Lusaka, Lubumbashi, the other one Durban, Joburg, Mafeking, Gaborone, Francistown, Bulawayo, Victoria Falls, through to Lusaka and Lubumbashi again. So that is really the North-South corridor as it stands. I think what is very important about the North-South corridor is it cannot be seen in isolation. We've always looked at it in terms of being a spine, and in terms of the definition as well, they talk always about the interconnecting corridors on the North-South corridor, the North-South. So you have the Maputo Development Corridor, Limpopo Development, Beira Development, Nacala Development, Mtwara in Tanzania, the Dar es Salaam Corridor, the Trans-Kalahari going through Namibia, Walvis Bay, Ndola Lubumbashi Corridor, and then the Lobito Corridor in Angola. So those really are the spines that are coming off, and you can't really view this North-South corridor in isolation. The whole thing is very interlinked. So the specific terms of reference, first of all, was to cover all professions under the BEPEC umbrella. So it wasn't just the consulting engineering side of things. We've looked at architecture, landscape architecture, quantity surveying, and construction project management. Grouping opportunities in terms of the various disciplines so that all the professions are given equal coverage. To provide a comprehensive insight into the opportunities for BEPEC members along the corridor. To develop a strategy for BEPEC members to access these project opportunities, to identify specific barriers to trade in the built environment services and provide recommendations on how to overcome these, to look at potential linkages between the projects, between the professions, and this is going to come up more and more as we go through this need to actually start looking at South Africa incorporated on the North-South corridor. To bring these opportunities to the export councils and their stakeholders, and most importantly, and this is just to underpin what Roelof said already, to significantly increase the number of opportunities beyond what each firm could achieve individually.
Now, we all know that Botswana has to diversify its economy away from diamonds. We know that. Although they've done a lot in the diamond industry, polishing industry and so on, diversification. They have this imperative, just like Mozambique has, where the south is too privileged compared to the north, and that's a big plan of theirs, which underlies all their conversations. So it's the same in Botswana. There's a need to balance the east and the west, because the east is far more developed than the west. PPPs, you know, this wonderful silver bullet that's going to solve all Africa's problems, called the PPPs, ain't so easy, eh? So very complex structures, very complex financial arrangements involved. Special purpose vehicles and heaven knows what all. So But nevertheless, they, like all of these markets, they see PPPs as a silver bullet. And I scratch around a little bit, and I find that I actually don't understand PPPs too well in some cases. They are very concerned with the power supply issue, like everybody is, and the need to avoid dependence on South Africa. So the immediate need is to increase that power supply by 300 megawatts quickly. The Morapula project, the 600 megawatt Morapula project, is a major, major priority for them, and it's mentioned all the time. And extend power supply to the coal and copper mines. They're a mining country. They have to get the power out to the productive areas. Because you also have coal bed methane people developing all kinds of projects as well, like I saw Kalahari Energy, one of the juniors operating there, which is very interesting. In the Botswana side of the Zimbabwe border, there's so much activity in coal bed methane. And in Lupane on the other side in Zimbabwe, there's nothing. Just shows you how politics can mess things up, because the Lord didn't draw that border. Man drew that border. And coal bed methane's on both sides. So why is one going and not the other? Botswana has basically committed to both Mozambique and Namibia on the moving of this coal, which can't be done by road truck. Rail is everything. Okay? So you'll hear lots of talk about the Trans-Kalahari rail line, which is a hell of an expensive venture. If you take a new rail, even on a good topography, will be about at least $1 million per kilometer. We're talking, you know, a serious project. So, and who's going to pay for it and so on? Yes, we know Walvis Bay is a well-functioning port. We all know that. But how the hang is this going to happen? The Trans-Kalahari road route is already there, so that's one advantage. But the push that I came across when I spoke to people, I know this is contentious, but they said, got to go east. Got to go east. Because shorter route, plus it can involve, for what it's worth, the Swazis, and even some of the South Africans in Mpumalanga, and to take it to Teko Benin port, which is just south of Maputo, not far from the KwaZulu-Natal border. There's a lot of emphasis on gas-fired power stations, so therefore the Orapa project is one. There are a number of one-stop border posts being proposed, as it's a century landlocked country. It makes a lot of sense for that, and therefore I've mentioned the proposals at Pioneers Gate, Martin's Drift, Charles Hill, etc., etc. At all of these, especially the Pioneer Gate, there's much talk of commercial property development. And then agriculture is a major aspect of Botswana's life. The idea to to add value to the beef industry and so on. And they have identified various areas, mainly in the west, that need to be disenclaved, is a word that we need to use a lot in this study, to stop it from being closed in. In other words, to get the transport links, which would link up to the North-South corridor. The government has decided to really cut costs. And they are reviewing a lot. And I don't know how many times I was told, hey, this project's now in waiting. It's austerity, it's austerity, it's austerity. Now we think of Botswana as rather a success story, as a middle-income country and so on. But believe me, that a lot of projects are being re-looked at. Furthermore, there's a fusion going on between the agencies. For example, PIDA, the Botswana Export Development and Investment Agency, is merging with the International Financial Services Center because to rationalize. That's fine for the government, but for you and I in this room, when we're trying to do business, it hiccups badly back at us, because what happens is guys don't know their roles properly. They're not sure they'll be in the job tomorrow. You know, Botswana is has a big problem. It has too many civil servants. Lack of engineers and funding. That comes up time and time again. You could ditto that for all the countries. Lack of funding, lack of sufficient engineers. I always say, there's some damn good people there. There's just not enough of them. Lack of practical rather than theoretical. This was said to me by GIZ. Now, there's a very good institution. The German Technical Assistance Agency used to be called GTZ, now it's GIZ. I work a lot with those guys because they have a multilateral aspect as well as a bilateral aspect, and they know a lot. Lack of government support. Very disappointed with this government support. And I think it comes back to, I think there's a problem in Botswana bureaucracy. I really do. The guys were saying, but we have these FIDIC meetings and we cannot get the Botswana government guys to come and join us. And we need them at the meetings. We need them. I really think that XIV Model is a great one. I think that a cheap but effective way of positioning ourselves as South Africa Inc., because that's what we're doing in this room, to take advantage of the programs and projects where we'll be in the bowels, the corridors of the decision making, would be through technical assistance. It's situating you with your brethren in Botswana. And you know that we've all got to have local partners. You know, there's margins of preference and all kinds of logical reasons why you should have local partners and shouldn't just go in tout seul, as we say in French. Okay, so that's Botswana in a few remarks. Wow, guys, I don't know where to. I came back from Maputo with my head full of stuff. That place is unbelievable. You know, I run a project database where I track for my clients, where I track greenfields and brownfields projects for them. Some of you in this room are clients of mine. I tell you, I don't know how to handle this. It is just so prolific at the moment. There is so much going on that Mozambique can just drain all your resources. If you look at Mozambique and you think of the map of Mozambique, everything's running east-west. Everything is running east-west. Nacala, Beira, Maputo. Okay, that's right in the south, but you know, you've got east-west phenomenon there. Plus you have a north-south political imperative. So, quite logically, feeders to link the projects. Why they like the Mutuali development corridor? For two reasons. Firstly, it would avoid Malawi. This is for the moving of the coal out of Zambezi Valley to Nacala. Because they've got 20 megatons per annum of coal to be moved out of the Zambezi Valley. And the Senalala line, which wasn't finished properly by the Indians, can only do 7, I don't know, we can debate it, 6, 7 megatons. So where's the other rest going to come? So this is mad scramble. Now the Mutuali corridor is an alternative, and I have the plans in my office to try and bypass Malawi. Their biggest problem is with such a big project pipeline, how do they coordinate those? And I really sympathize with them. When I sat with the Ministry of Planning, it is a headache to keep all of this under control. All of this mad activity under control. Little secret, I have it on good authority that there's more coal in Niassa province than what there is even in the Zambezi Valley. Whether it's the right kind of coal or not, I'm not sure. But you see how Pemba is developing right now, those of you who know it, and how the northern Mozambique is becoming another focal point. They really cannot handle it with all of this. So Mozambique, I must give them credit because they were highly bureaucratic in the old days, and they still are, but they really have made great progress that way. I mean, there's no comparison between Angola and Mozambique on bureaucratic things. I know many of you will cry about various bureaucratic problems you've had, but I think there's been a great improvement. Industrial parks development. This Gazida program for special economic zones program, I had a very good meeting with them. They're quite serious about this, creating these industrial nodes. The legal framework, and especially on land tenure, is still a problem. It's still not finalized. Land is still confusing. And I think that one area where we could really help Mozambique would be to help them with land tenure. I saw that in Madagascar when I saw a major, before Madagascar had its little problem. There was a major program to sort out their land issues. And it really holds things back big time. Ministry of Transport has announced 5,000 kilometers of new rail lines, and then they've mentioned 4 of the rail lines. Plus, people like Nkondezi and Minas de Rububwe, the smaller coal operators in the Zambezi Valley, are marking out their own separate rail line outskirts, because the miners, the coal miners, are not collaborating with one another. Rio Tinto and Vale, the two biggies, are not each one's looking at its own way to get its coal out. It's like a mad scramble. So this is creating project opportunities for us. It might be a big problem for the Mozambicans, but it's creating project opportunities. These smaller feeder routes to get the coal out is very interesting. So therefore, you know about the development of Chinde Port, for example, on the Zambezi mouth. That's one example, but there are plenty of other examples of Makuba Port, various ports along the coast that have been earmarked for development, and then a rail linkage to Tet, or to the Zambezi Valley. So Nkondezi and Minas Rububwe have done an MOU, a joint venture, where they say, okay, to hang with Rio Tinto and Vale, we will make our own plan. Airports development programs. Now Tet airport is sitting on a major coal deposit, so it has to move. So not that it's a huge airport even now, but still. And Tet is you can fly directly, it's an international airport status. Nampula in the north, the airports program is also related to this whole story. Power, of course, it's the big project is the Sezul project. That is the big project. That's the power backbone that will take power from Tet right to Maputo. That is, I was there when they did a briefing in Maputo on that project. It's a key project. Nacala will have an airport. It has a military airport now. It'll have a proper airport soon, and soon we'll be able to fly to Nacala and not just Nampula. So there are a lot of these provincial, and then a lot of Mozambique's got, in the water sector, for example, there's a lot of provincial projects happening in Vilanculos, etc., places like that, which depend on the efficiency of the municipality. Mozambique's such a strange place. You can be going, like I drove from Vilanculos to Inhasora, and then you have a nice route, and all of a sudden the road will be shocking. And they'll say, oh, well, now we're in this provincial territory now, where they're not so keen on the roads. Okay, constraints to achieving the projects. Very big issue in Mozambique, and not all the countries are the same, even though you might say ditto for Botswana or something like that. This is, in Mozambique's case, there is, guys, believe me, there's huge sensitivity about all these projects happening without benefiting the local population. It's not just an airy-fairy, feel-good, help your brother kind of thing. It's a business reality. It's going to bite us in the backside if we don't deal with this. Lack of sufficient local skilled labourers, too many Zimbabweans working in the TET area because there aren't enough artisans. You know, Zimbabweans are well skilled and so on, so there are too many of them and too few Mozambicans working there. There's too little participation by local companies in this whole story. You know, you go to a place like Nigeria, there are strong local companies involved in the oil sector, like Oando and so on. But how many substantial Mozambican companies can you really identify? Not many. So that is a problem, because you also need partners that are valid. Eh? You're not Boy Scouts or Girl Guides. You're not there only to give charity, trying to do business. There's a hell of a lot of planning going on. We're drowning in paper in Mozambique. But implementation. Our tactic should be to come in on a problem-solving approach with the Mozambicans. We'll help you implement. Getting quite sticky on expats. They have a quota system for expats, which they do grant exemptions for. Can you believe they don't have a chamber of mines there? I think that doesn't make sense. Community social investment programs and environment impact. Those guys, some of you have got environment impact abilities in this room. Get those guys, your EI guys, play a big role in Mozambique. It's a very important part of it for the reasons I gave. Support the BPAC Trade Facilitation Initiative in TET. And also support the PD Naidu Imperial Logistics whole concession they have on the industrial park. I think it's a no-brainer to me, unless I'm not seeing something. Why would you not want to have an installation? Are you going to get your own place? You're going to have a problem with land, just to begin with, before we even go further. So if you have a pipeline of what DBSA is looking at in Mozambique, if they'll give it to you, and IDC, you now have a pipeline. You know with those projects you're cooking with gas. You know that there's money for these projects. Because how many times you go into a project and you don't verify the source of funding? And you can waste your time tendering and going mad on a project which is never going to see the light of day because the bucks ain't going to come. Project without bucks is a piece of paper.
I remind you, the implementing agents for the PIDA projects ultimately is the national government. So if you sit in Mauritania and you need a new road or a new railway, it is the roads agency or the rail agency that is going to take responsibility for that. The thing that's going to be added to that, as I mentioned earlier, is the head of state pressure to get that done sooner or to prioritize it, and for African governments as a grouping to put funding into that, and for the African Union, if there are any blockages to get the rail across a border or to get the goods across a border, that sort of thing, there will be this whole PIDA system that will speed it up and unblock those blockages, similar to what was envisaged in NEPAD. Before PIDA, you could not walk into a implementing agent or a government agency, or for argument's sake, a president's office, and say, Mr. President, you know what, this is what you need. And it's not just me saying that. It is clear from the vision in PIDA on transportation or energy, and we have a solution as private sector. And according to Leon's comment, create the space for us in an equitable manner. You know, there's always this problem of the inside track of the private sector or the one shipping line getting all the benefit from the port. But we need to talk through that challenge, because if you don't talk through that challenge and put a space for the private sector to operate in, and even if it has constitutional issues or legal issues, talk through that and solve the problem. Otherwise, and Africans, as I've said earlier, need to take that ownership.